Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. On today's episode, we jump ahead to the period just after the defeat of Grand Admiral Thrawn and the Emperor's clone. Luke Skywalker searches the galaxy for candidates to help rebuild the Jedi Order. Meanwhile, Han and Chewie head to Kessel on a diplomatic mission, but find it's more trouble than they could ever imagine. It's Jedi Search by Kevin J. Anderson, the first book in the Jedi Academy trilogy. And to help me talk about the book today, let me introduce a new voice to the show. It's Dan. Dan, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Aaron. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for asking. And thank you for joining me today. Now, Dan, give us a brief introduction to yourself and tell us a little bit of your Star Wars story. How did you become a fan?
Well, I'm in the military with you. We've known each other for some time. I remember during COVID when you were talking about getting this show started, and I was really excited for it. And I think with a lot of people, Star Wars got its hooks in me when I was a kid. Nothing's cooler than a laser sword when you're young. And I remember going to my aunt's house, and she would just play it on repeat for me. Darth Vader was the scariest thing that I'd ever seen in my life, and he's still pretty intimidating. But throughout the years, I've just tried to keep up with all of the media that comes out, comics and books. But yeah, it's went from just enjoying the original trilogy and nauseum to playing a lot of the games. I love the Pod Racer game on 64, showing my age a little bit, but it was a lot of fun. All the way up until Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor was a fun game. I'm hoping that they bring it home with the end of that trilogy.
So you talked about enjoying some Star Wars books. Do you have much experience with the Legend stories?
Outside of this podcast, no. I do have the Darth Bane trilogy that I read after listening to your first couple episodes. They're the original print too. They have the god-awful book covers on them, not the new reprints that are beautiful.
Yeah, for the Essential Legends collection. So this is the first time that you have read the Jedi Academy trilogy, correct?
It is. I have no prior knowledge of the Jedi Academy trilogy. I've got a good feeling about how things might turn out, considering that I listened to your New Jedi Order series that you did with your crew. But I'm excited to read something new, something different.
We probably got into a few spoilers there, but for the most part, these are going to be new books for you, and I'm really looking forward to getting your opinions, not only on the whole trilogy, but specifically on this book today. However, before we get into that, let's take some listener questions. We have 2 emails today. The first is from Waylon. Dan, would you please read Waylon's email?
Of course. Waylon says, I was watching The Mandalorian and had a good laugh at Grief Karga saying, "Come on, baby, do the magic hand thing." It got me thinking, what are some of your favorite comedic moments in the Star Wars franchise?
Thank you very much for the email, Waylon. Well, I have said it before, I have a pretty narrow sense of humor. I don't find Star Wars as funny as most people. However, there are some parts that really do make me laugh. I will say in The Force Awakens, when Rey is trying to fix the Falcon and she's asking for the specific roll of tape and she keeps pointing at what she wants Finn to pick up and he keeps picking up other things and she still keeps pointing at the one, that makes me laugh. The really stupid joke in the second season of The Bad Batch where the sisters, the one says they need a distraction. The other says, we need a distraction. And the first one says, is there an Echo in here? And then Echo turns around and says, I'm Echo. And she says, what? I'm Echo. That makes me laugh. But my favorite joke in Star Wars, it's just a one line that C-3PO has in Return of the Jedi when they're on Jabba's sail barge and he bumps into R2, and it's the first time he and R2 have seen each other in a few weeks. He bumps into R2 and he says, R2-D2, what are you doing here? And R2 does his beeps, and C-3PO just says, well, I can see you're serving drinks, but this place is dangerous. I don't know why that line makes me laugh. He says, what are you doing here? And R2 just goes, well, I'm serving drinks. What does it look like I'm doing here? You know? So anyway, that's my favorite joke in Star Wars. Dan, do you have any funny parts of Star Wars?
Yeah, I like to, I guess, keep it at a less is more thing. I love the dynamic between 3PO and R2 where you're just getting funny beeps from R2 and then 3PO's like, well, of course. Or like, don't call me that or something. But even something as small as just Han just doing his little shrug that he does. I like that. Yeah, that gets me. Yeah, I'm more of a less is more when it comes to humor. But yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat as you.
Today's second email comes from Edwin, who says, if you could canonize one thing from Legends, what would it be? And if you could decanonize one thing from Star Wars canon, what would that be? Well, thank you very much for the email, Edwin. Dan, I'll let you answer Edwin's questions first, although we know that you don't have much experience with Legends, but is there something from the Darth Bane trilogy that you've read that you would like to see in canon?
Yeah, I enjoy the entire Darth Bane trilogy. He's probably got to be my favorite Star Wars character, maybe short of Darth Maul, but that's because there's more media covering Darth Maul. I would like to see more Revan things, if not Darth Bane. You don't have to bring all of the Knights of the Old Republic game into canon, but just show Revan a little bit more love.
Is there something that doesn't work for you to the level that you would like to see it decanonized?
Would it be too much of a charged answer to say Episode 9?
No, I mean, it's your opinion.
Oh, well, then yeah, Episode 9. I know that Episode 8 gets a lot of flack, but I liked how things ended where you could go anywhere with the story, which I was hoping that they would do for Episode 9, but that they just spun it right back around to Palpatine and Rey being a Palpatine. And I like the message from Episode 8 where you could come from nothing and, achieve greatness. And yeah, I was hoping that they were going to pull more from that.
Well, for me, if I could take one thing from Legends and make it canon, I am interested in a lot of the storytelling surrounding the quote-unquote normal people of the galaxy, the non-Force users. I would love to see more stories about the X-Wing fighters, like the people from Rogue Squadron and Wraith Squadron. That's the kind of thing that I get interested in. And then if I could decanonize one thing, I don't really like to talk about the things that I dislike in Star Wars, but I'll go back to one of the things that I have discussed on this show. I'm not a big fan of how almost fantastical the lore around lightsabers has become. I kind of like how lightsabers were in the original trilogy, where they were a weapon. They were a tool. They were a very specific type of weapon and tool. I'm not a big fan of the lore around kyber crystals and the lore around why the Sith or dark Jedi have red lightsabers and why Ahsoka and Orla Jareni from the High Republic have white lightsabers. I would just kind of like to go back to a simpler explanation around lightsabers myself.
I think I'm in the opposite of it, where I love that there's an identity to the lightsaber, because it also is reflected on that character.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people love that. So, again, it may not work for me, but it doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the storytelling.
If I could give a simpler answer for the decanonize instead of the episode 9, it's more of a current Lucasfilms Disney thing that they've been doing with lightsabers, but force stopping blasters and force stopping the lightsaber. Most recently in Ahsoka. It's almost too much. It was cool the one time when Kylo Ren did it at the beginning of episode 7, but then it's just become well, you have force powers, you can stop everything.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the emails, Waylon and Edwin. Now, listener, if you have a question for the show, you can email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram, all at SW Legends Lounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, you can record a short message and email it in, but please record it in MP3 audio format. And coming up at the end of the show, I've got an email from a listener who disagrees with some of my opinions about Mara Jade. You want to stick around for that. But now, it's time for today's book, Jedi Search by Kevin J. Anderson, book number 1 in the Jedi Academy trilogy. Dan, are you ready?
I'm ready, Aaron. Let's do it.
Well, grab yourself a drink, and let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge.
The story begins near the Great Maul Cluster at Kessel. Han and Chewie have been sent as official government representatives to negotiate for the planet to join the New Republic. The former Imperial penal colony is now run by Morth Dole. The Rybet led an uprising at the prison after the rebellion destroyed the second Death Star. Dole now controls the planet's spice mining operation, and he doesn't want to give it up. Dole orders the Kessel Defense Fleet to attack the Millennium Falcon. Han and Chewie try to avoid the ragtag group of ships, but they're trapped and forced down, crash landing on the planet's surface.
On Coruscant, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker addresses a meeting of the New Republic Council. The Empire has been almost completely destroyed, with Grand Admiral Thrawn and the Emperor's clone having been defeated. Luke wants to take advantage of this relatively peaceful time to reform the Jedi Order. He asks the Council's permission to travel the galaxy to search for Force-sensitive people to train as a new generation of Jedi Knights. Of course, the Council grants Luke's request. As he prepares to leave to visit 2 possible candidates, Luke leaves 3PO and R2 to search the Republic's databases for other possible Force-sensitive beings. And he has a request for his sister. In order to restart the Order, the Jedi are going to need a place to train. And it'll be Leia's job to find a suitable world for them.
However, Leia has other duties. She's the new Minister of State and right hand to Mon Mothma. the Chief of State puts Leia in charge of organizing a diplomatic visit from Ambassador Fergan. He's the leader of one of the few remaining Imperial worlds, Karita, the home of the Imperial Military Academy. But that's not all Leia has on her plate. Jaina and Jason are coming home. The Solo twins have been living in isolation with Leia's assistant, Winter. Now it's time for the 2-year-olds to rejoin their parents. When the twins arrive, Leia is overjoyed. But it's a big change for the children, and they test their mother every chance they get. Still, Leia is grateful the twins are home. If only Han had been there with her to welcome them.
Unfortunately, there's a reason why Han and Chewie aren't there to greet the children, because they've been taken into custody on Kessel. When Morith Dul realizes who he shot down, he panics. The Rybet can't risk the New Republic learning about what happened to the 2 heroes of the rebellion. Dul sentences Han and Chewie to work in the spice mines, deep beneath Kessel's surface. There, they meet a 17-year-old named Kip Duran. Kip tells Han that his family settled on Kessel about 5 years ago. His older brother was taken by the Empire just before the prison revolt, and his parents were killed in the rioting. Young Kip was sent to the mines, and he's been there ever since.
Luke travels to Eol Shah, a harsh world filled with volcanoes, geysers, and earthquakes. Luke is searching for someone he believes may be the descendant of a lost Jedi. Gantoris is the leader of a small colony on Eol Shah. He's skeptical of the Jedi Master, and he asks Luke if he's the dark man that Gantoris has dreamed about. Luke is taken aback, and he tries to assure Gantoris that all he wants to do is show Gantoris how to use the Force and help protect the galaxy. Eventually, Gantoris agrees to go, but only if Luke can pass 2 tests and survive the harsh landscape of Eol Shah.
Back on Coruscant, Lando Calrissian arrives for a visit. But with planning a diplomatic meeting and taking care of twin toddlers, Leia doesn't really have time for him. She suggests that Lando help Luke in his quest to rebuild the Jedi Order. R2 and 3PO find a candidate on the planet Umgol. Lando and the droids head to the planet and find a man named Timo, who seems to just know who's going to win the blob races with the biggest purses. But Lando soon realizes that Timo isn't Force sensitive. He's a cheat. And Timo's got a huge bounty on his head. Lando and the droids apprehend Timo as he tries to rig another blob race. Lando earns 1 million credits after turning the cheater over to the authorities.
Han, Chewie, and Kip are sent deeper into the Glitter Stim mines, to a section where quite a few workers have disappeared recently. The group hears a strange sound, like something skittering along the walls. They slowly creep around the corner and run straight into a huge energy spider. The creature grabs the 2 guards as Han, Chewie, and Kip run back to the mine transport. They race back to the tunnel entrance and break through the surface. Kip leads the way to a hangar where the 3 steal a transport. As the transport lifts off, Morith Dul orders the ships to chase them down. Han bobs and weaves, but the transport doesn't have shields and weapons to fight off the defense force. But Kip has an idea. The only way to escape is to head into the Maul cluster.
Luke's first test on Eol Shah is to climb down into a geyser to gather food. Gantoris shows Luke how to harvest an edible lichen that grows in the walls of the geysers. But when Luke follows the younger man down the tube, Gantoris tricks him and climbs out. Luke starts to ascend the tube as the geyser erupts. Using the Force to protect himself, Luke directs the water and steam around his body, then Force leaps up and out of the tube and slowly descends to land beside a stunned Gantoris. But the large man has one more test for the Jedi Master: to walk across a lake of lava in one of the planet's volcanoes. When Luke gets to the middle of the lake, a huge snake-like beast erupts from beneath the lava. As Gantoris and the other settlers watch, Luke ignites his lightsaber. When the creature lunges at him, Luke leaps into the air and slashes through one of the beast's scales, allowing lava to enter the wound, killing it. After the battle, Luke crosses the lake, and Gantoris agrees to go with him. But Luke makes Gantoris a promise to have the New Republic relocate the settlers of Eolsha to a more peaceful world.
Han and Chewie watch in stunned silence as Kip navigates their transport through the Maw cluster. One wrong turn and they'll be sucked into one of the cluster's black holes. But Kip flies through the cluster like he can see an invisible pathway. Han instantly realizes Kip must be using the Force. He'll have to take Kip to meet Luke, if they live that long. Suddenly, Kip opens his eyes. We're almost to the middle of the Maw. We'll be safe there. A few seconds later, the transport drops out of hyperspace, and Han finds himself face to face with 4 Imperial Star Destroyers.
On Coruscant, Leia welcomes Ambassador Fergan to a reception at a botanical garden. She tries to talk about Kurita joining the New Republic, but Fergan refuses to listen. He's very short with Leia. He's belligerent. Mostly, he's just plain rude. Fergan seems insulted that he's speaking with Leia instead of the Chief of State. But eventually, Mon Mothma does arrive. The three start talking when Fergan raises his glass and calls for a toast. Then he throws his drink in Mon Mothma's face. The ambassador storms out of the reception and returns to his ship, shouting that Kurita will never join the New Republic.
Luke and Gantoris arrive on Bespin to find another potential Force user. A Tibanna gas prospector named Streen lives as a hermit on the lonely gas platform. When Luke talks to Streen about the Force, the hermit asks if the Jedi Master can teach him how to turn off all of the voices. The remark confuses Luke and Gantoris. Streen explains that the reason he's a hermit is because whenever he's around people, the sounds of their thoughts overwhelm him. But Streen says he misses being around others. If Luke can teach him how to shut out the noises, Streen says he'll join the Jedi Master. Luke smiles and promises to teach Streen how to be around people again.
Han, Chewie, and Kip are captured by the Imperials in the Maw cluster, and Han is taken in front of their commander, Admiral Natasi Dalla. Dalla's position is unique. Han has never known of a woman rising up to the rank of admiral within the Empire. More than a decade ago, Dalla was at the Imperial Academy on Kurita when she became noticed by Grand Moff Tarkin. Under his eye, Dalla eventually rose in rank and was placed in charge of the Maw installation, where Imperial scientists designed the Death Star and other weapons. Dalla tortures Han and learns about the destruction of both Death Stars, the deaths of Tarkin, Vader, and the Emperor, and the fall of the Empire. The news infuriates Dalla, who decides it's time to leave the Maw cluster and hurt the New Republic. And she plans to use a new weapon her scientists have recently developed, the Sun Crusher.
When Luke and Lando return to Coruscant following their investigations, Leia tells them that she still hasn't heard from Han, and he should have returned from Kessel more than a week ago. The two decide to head to Kessel themselves and find out what happened. When they arrive, they meet with Morith Duel under the guise of 2 prospective investors in the Rybet spice mining operation. When Duel gives them a tour of the facility, Luke uses the Force to try and sense Han and Chewie, but he senses nothing. However, when Duel shows them the hangar where the Kessel Defense Fleet is housed, Lando recognizes the Millennium Falcon. Luke and Lando jump aboard the Falcon and lift off the planet, but Duel orders his fighters to chase them and destroy them before they can return to the New Republic.
When Han is returned to his cell, he's visited by one of the installation's scientists, Qui Zooks. The Umwati has somewhat of an ethereal look. Pale blue skin, pearlescent hair, and deep blue eyes. Qui asks Han questions about the Death Stars, seemingly eager to hear whether or not he was impressed by the battle stations. When Han asks Qui if she knows what they were used for, she says the stations were designed for mining, to break up asteroids. "Are you naive?" Han asks. Tarkin used the first Death Star to blow up Alderaan. The second blew up several ships in the Rebel fleet, and the World Devastators almost destroyed Mon Cala. The scientist quickly realizes how much she's been used and deceived by the Empire. A few hours later, Qui returns and breaks Han out of his cell. After they free Chewie and Kip, Qui says they can't leave yet. They need to do one more thing. She leads them to a secret hangar where they find a small ship about the size of an Imperial transport. "What is that?" Han asks. "It's called the Sun Crusher," Qui says. "We have to steal it."
As Luke and Lando try to flee the Kessel Defense Forces, they realize something is wrong with the Falcon. It's clear that whatever damage it sustained on Kessel is causing it to not fly right. It's sluggish, and it's pretty obvious Luke and Lando aren't going to be able to outrun the Kessel forces. Their only option? To hide in the Maw cluster. However, it soon becomes apparent they aren't going to make it before the fighters catch them. But suddenly, Luke and Lando see a small shuttle emerge from the Maw cluster, followed closely by 4 Imperial Star Destroyers.
Han, Chewie, Kip, and Qui escape the Maw to find the Kessel Defense Fleet zooming straight at them, led by Luke and Lando in the Millennium Falcon. Just then, Dalla's Star Destroyers open fire on the Kessel fighters, plunging the situation into chaos. In the confusion, the Sun Crusher and the Millennium Falcon are able to jump to hyperspace. They arrive at Coruscant, where Han and Chewie reunite with their friends and family. Qui turns the Sun Crusher over to New Republic officials for studying, and Han introduces Kip Duran to Luke. After sensing the young man has very strong natural force abilities, Luke invites Kip to join him, trying to rebuild the Jedi Order.
The story ends on Yavin 4. Luke stands on top of the great Masasi Temple, looking down over the dense jungle below. When Leia told Luke that he could use Yavin 4 for his new academy, the Jedi Master jumped at his sister's suggestion. The Great Temple once served as the rebel headquarters during the Battle of Yavin nearly 10 years ago. Now, it will serve as the seat of the new Jedi Academy, a place that Luke hopes to train a new generation of defenders of peace and justice in the galaxy.
Time for a break. When we return, Dan and I will talk more about Jedi Search. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But allow me to recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, is the story of Galen Erso, Orson Krennic, and the construction of the first Death Star. It's a story of intrigue, betrayal, and how a friendship can be destroyed. An essential story leading up to Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Check out Catalyst, a Rogue One novel by James Luceno. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today, Dan and I are talking about the first book in the Jedi Academy trilogy, Jedi Search by Kevin J. Anderson. Okay, Dan, it was the first time that you have read this story. What are your overall thoughts on the book?
Well, first, I want to thank you for picking the book with the largest font and the least amount of pages. That came in handy. But I enjoyed it. There were, as I was reading it, there were maybe unnecessary callbacks. I think like in the first chapter, Luke recalls his father, Darth Vader, who was swayed by the Empire, or I don't know, just some things like that. But as far as the story itself, I love a good recruiting the team kind of story, and it's mixed in with not one but essentially two prison breaks, and a prison break story is always fun. So overall, I'm really liking the start of this trilogy.
Yeah, I would say that Kevin J. Anderson is not one of my favorite authors. This book came out in 1993, I believe. I was 15 at the time, and even then, yes, I do think the story is fun, but I think his writing style just isn't for me. Some of those callbacks you were talking about, to me, I think his writing style is just a little too simplistic. But even considering that, I do think there are interesting parts to this story. For me, the most interesting part is the Imperial installation hidden within the Maul cluster and how they have been separated from the galaxy for over 10 years. Just thinking about if you were separated for so long and you did not know what was happening in the galaxy, that's just got to be freaky after you hear what has taken place over the last decade. To me, that was the most interesting part of the book.
Definitely. And it reminds me of like the real life story of the Japanese soldier that didn't know that the war had ended, and it wasn't until 72, I think, that he like came home, but he spent the majority of his life following this cause, and like the world had already moved on, and this installation was basically doing the same thing. Also, what is it with Star Wars and solar system destroying installations or ships? It's like twins and something that's gonna blow something up and eliminate everything. It's like that's Star Wars.
Yeah, twins and super weapons.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Yeah, I think that was another reason why some people who aren't as big a fan of this trilogy aren't as big a fan of this trilogy, because of, oh, we have another super weapon. Because if you just go from the beginning of the saga, we had the Death Star, then we had the second Death Star. If you read the Dark Empire comics that came out in the early 90s, you had the Galaxy Gun. Now you have the Sun Crusher. And believe me, there are more and more super weapons that continue up through 2015 in The Force Awakens, when we had Star Killer Base. So, yes, there are super weapons all the time in Star Wars.
That is just what Star Wars is one family and super weapons.
Yep, that's what it is.
Just making it crap for everyone else.
So you say you like a story where the team gets formed?
I do, yeah. Like an Ocean's 11, I'm assembling a team. I love that kind of figuring out which characters, like what makes them tick, what like they bring to the table.
Well, if you like an Ocean's 11 style book, you'll have to listen in a few weeks when I cover Scoundrels. That is Star Wars Ocean's 11. Han puts together a heist team. So That's exactly what that is. But in this book specifically, Luke is trying to reform the Jedi Order. He's looking for information about people who either could be descendants of former Jedi, or what does it say? He's got R2 and 3PO looking for people who there are so many coincidences that take place around these people that maybe something else is going on there.
Right. And so this would be 29 years since the episode 3?
It's, let me see, after Return of the Jedi, I believe it's 6 years. Yeah, because the Thrawn trilogy takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi. This is 6 years. This is right after that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know, as far as Legends, how much the Emperor wiped public knowledge of the Force and just scrubbed all of that information from as much as he could from the galaxy. So if you're a person like Streen and you just start going crazy when you're around people and you have no knowledge that it's actually the Force, I imagine that'd be pretty terrifying.
Yeah, he's wiped out a lot of information about the Jedi. When this book was written, this was still when most people, including people within Lucasfilm, believed that the Clone Wars were roughly 40 years before A New Hope instead of 19 years before A New Hope. So there were decades where the Emperor and Vader went around the galaxy wiping out all information about the Jedi Order. So there's been over a generation of people in the galaxy who have grown up without the Jedi, only hearing legends about them. So yeah, it was pretty complete at this time.
Definitely. So I can see the hesitance from Streen and from Guntoris, where you're going to have to prove that you are who you say you are. And I also want to make sure that you're not, some possible nightmare that's, you know that I have these abilities, but are you going to use them for good, or are you going to use me as a tool to hurt other people?
And we get some foreshadowing with that when Luke shows up on Eo Shah and Gantoris asks Luke if he's the dark man of Luke's dreams. Who do you think Gantoris is talking about?
Do you want to give me and the listeners a hint? Is it somebody already established, or is it somebody limited to this trilogy?
Well, I mean, this wasn't like a trivia question. Okay, I'm just wondering, narratively in the story, you can understand Gantoris's hesitancy. You see someone show up with these seemingly magical abilities, and of course, Luke being Luke, he has to dress in all black with a black hood and a black cloak and everything. So I can understand from Gantoris's point of view, I've had recurring nightmares about someone who's going to come and potentially harm me. The way Luke shows up, I would think that's a safe bet from Gantoris's point of view.
Definitely. Yeah, I would. I'd be a little hesitant too. Why Luke has to walk around like an edgelord when he's the warrior of light and justice and peace.
So we know that when this book was written, the only things that had been out from George Lucas himself were the original trilogy. And in that, we hear Yoda say to Obi-Wan that he originally did not want to train Luke because Luke was too old to begin the training. Luke is now trying to reform the Jedi Order. He has Leia, who he practices with a little, but Leia has other duties that she has. She's trying to help reform the Republic. He knows that there are 3 Force-sensitive children, his 2 nephews and his niece. But other than that, I'm sorry, Luke's not going to be able to just look for young people. He's going to have to look for adults to try to train.
Yeah, you're not the codexes are gone from the old, or not the old Republic, but before the Empire took over. So you're not going to be getting the kids, right out of diapers like the Jedi used to be able to do.
Right. So can you foresee any problems Luke will have trying to train people who aren't, 2 years old when he gets them? People who are teenagers, young adults, even older adults. The way they describe Streen, I picture him as middle-aged. So can you foresee any problems with that in the future?
Now that you say that, I'm looking forward to maybe there being some problems. If people become a little less flexible as they get older and they're set in their ways, and then if you layer on top of that mystical abilities that can be influenced maybe by they're influenced by your character, we know that, but your emotions, and then maybe you don't even feel like listening to the teachings of Luke. If he stays as strict and as stringent as the old Jedi, somebody that would be even my age would be far less keen to just drop everything and become a member of an order that until recently didn't even exist.
So if Luke's search for Force-sensitive candidates is the A plot, the B plot is Han and Chewie going to Kessel. There they find a young man named Kip Duran, who Han is able to intuit also must be Force-sensitive. What are your opinions on this new character, Kip Duran? Now, I say new, but you said earlier you listened to our new Jedi Order series. So Kip Duran does grow up and become an adult and become a Jedi. That's not a spoiler. But what did you think of the introduction in the timeline to Kip Duran that we got in this book?
I liked it, and I think it recalls back to our listener question where I was talking about being able to create greatness from nothing, and not saying that Kip Duran is a nothing character, but going from being a slave in the mines to all of the adventures that he was able to accomplish with Luke, and he kind of became a mainstay in the Legends storylines. I like that it's a small beginnings, and then knowing the hero that he becomes is pretty exciting.
What did you think of this storyline with Han, Chewie, Kip in the spice mines at Kessel?
The whole time I was thinking, man, he can't catch a break. And I was really rooting for him before he got thrown in there. He was trying to sweet talk his way with Morith Duel. I was like, he might be able to pull this off, and we're getting like little sprinklings of the Han that we know that's he's a charmer and a schemer. And I think even when he was trying to tell the truth, nobody would believe him because they knew of him being a charmer and a schemer.
Yeah, I think he does a pretty good job accurately portraying Han's character and the Han and Chewbacca dynamic in these stories.
Yeah, I like that. You wouldn't have a Han paragraph without him either Han acknowledging Chewie or just hearing Chewie yelling or beating somebody up in the background, which I can just visualize like that almost comedic routine of like this Laurel and Hardy-esque. Like, I'm the talker and he's the muscle.
You know, one thing I didn't realize until we read this is how many books I've chosen recently for the podcast that involve huge spiders for some reason. Just got finished a bunch of episodes on the Bounty Hunter Wars where we had Kudar Mobat, who was a big spider-like character. And now in this book, in the Spice Mine of Kessel, we have the Glitterstum spiders, the energy spiders, who I guess somehow that's where the spice comes from. It's made from their webbing, I guess. It wasn't exactly clear to me where the spice came from, but somehow the spiders are connected to it.
Yeah, Star Wars they like spiders. That episode of the Mandalorian with when they crash land and he has to deal with those things. Yeah, that. And
then of course Rebels on their one base, the spiders all over the place.
Right. Yeah. There's just spiders are scary in real life. Now imagine them being twice your size. That's terrifying. And that's probably the closest that they can get to PG-13 horror, with just having this giant spider snatch you.
I always like to ask the guests what their favorite part of the book was. What was your favorite part, Dan?
I think that my favorite part is Leia trying to deal with all of her duties as Mon Mothma's right hand, and then all of her other jobs, and then still try and be a parent. Are
you saying you have some sympathy for someone who has a pair of 2-year-old twins?
Yes. Yeah. Mine are 3, and thankfully they're not force sensitive because they get into enough trouble without Jedi powers. But yeah, that really resonated with me. And I just pictured my wife, like she has 3 jobs that all have to do with either nursing or teaching nursing, and then she does all of that and then still finds time to just be the superhero around the house taking care of our twins. So yeah, I enjoyed that part, and I had nothing but sympathy for Leia.
Was there any part of the story that didn't work for you?
No, I feel like anything that might not have been working is going to work itself out in the trilogy. Like I said earlier, the random, to me, unnecessary like callbacks just in the writing is the only thing that would throw me off from the story. But other than that, I enjoyed pretty much all of it, and I'm looking forward to the next book in the series.
Well, my favorite part, as I said, was the Maul installation with the Imperials. I really liked the character of Admiral Natasi Dala. I grew to appreciate her a lot more later in Legends than here at the beginning. I don't think this book is a great introduction for the character, but I do think the character, she gets more to do as the trilogy goes on. And by the end of the trilogy, I do think she, while again, it's an Imperial that our heroes are up against, and yes, that does get monotonous, I think she is an effective antagonist for our heroes in this trilogy. It may not be my favorite series, but I do like her dynamic with our heroes in this story.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to her as well, because a story's hero is only as entertaining as its villain, and in most cases the villains tend to steal the show over the heroes. So I'm looking forward to her character progression.
Well, Dan, it's almost time to wrap up, but first, I have an email from a listener, TJ, who disagrees with some of my opinions about Mara Jade. TJ's email was very nice. It was a very interesting email, but it is a little long, so I had to edit it down a little bit for the podcast. Dan, would you please read TJ's email?
Absolutely. TJ says, when discussing Mara Jade, you point back to Yoda's commentary on the dark side and its consequences. I have thought on both sides. When I watch the original trilogy, I get the impression that both Yoda and Obi-Wan don't believe that you can come back from the dark side. That's the message I feel Yoda is talking about when he tells Luke that forever it will dominate your destiny. On Mara Jade, you say you have an issue with her not having to atone for her crimes. But that is a bit murky, as she was working within the legal government at the time. Were her actions ethical? That's debatable. But she was raised from a young age to be brainwashed and trained to serve Palpatine. So, what does she need to atone for? I'm not saying you're incorrect, but war is murky, and I don't remember her taking any actions that would be considered a war crime. Now, if you mean you wanted to see Mara Jade wrestle with who she once was and come to terms with her actions serving in an empire, who she later realized was very evil, yes, that is a great character arc to discuss. These are fascinating conversations that I feel Legends sometimes let slide, characters doing horrible things and not having too many repercussions.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinion, TJ. Now, listener, if you disagree with something I've said on the podcast, email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram at swlegendslounge. I'll read your opinion on the show. And keep sending in your favorite Star Wars character groups, your fighter squadrons, Mount Rushmores, road trip crews, Sabacc games, your mixtape, I haven't gotten one of those in a while, or if you have an unpopular Star Wars opinion you'd like to share, let me know. I love reading the things you listeners come up with. Dan, it's just about time to go. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Aaron, thank you very much for having me.
Coming up on the next episode of the Star Wars Legends Lounge, it's book number 2 in the Jedi Academy trilogy, Dark Apprentice by Kevin J. Anderson. Dan, would you like to join me again to talk about that book coming up in 2 weeks?
I'd love to. I want to see where this story goes.
Awesome. Listener, you can look forward to Dan and I talking about Dark Apprentice coming up on July 12th. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in Legends.